Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ODPP Café. My name is Anita Onuko. The ODPP Café is brought to you by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. The aim of the show is to inform, to educate, and to have a discussion with you and with experts about the criminal justice system and how it affects our day-to-day life, and also for you to just know when you talk about any issue in the criminal justice system, you speak from a point of knowledge and empowerment. So please join in. Follow us on Facebook at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Follow us on Twitter at ODPP_KE. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. As always, you're going to start with what has been happening at the courts. Not an exhaustive list as usual. We just give you highlights of what has been happening at the courts this week. And of course, there's more, but this is just a few of those things. Well, before we start the show, we normally take you through this, this quick highlight to just get you informed. So the first case I'm going to look at is for motorcycle riders who are charged with theft. So 3 motorcycle riders who allegedly accosted a motorist in Riruta, Nairobi, stole from him after accusing him of beating one of them was charged. They were charged with theft. I know you've seen this happen a lot when you get into a small altercation with motorcycle riders. Half the time you just want to drive off and go to the nearest police station because a lot of things happen when you're trying to argue out your case. So this happened, and Anthony Njenga, Joab Kibet, and Peter Wairiria, they robbed Peter Mbogwa of a toolkit valued at 11,600 on July 27th in Kabiria. So they denied the charges before Principal Magistrate Sharon Maroro and were released on a cash bail of 50,000 each. Their case will be mentioned on August 16th. So sometimes you get into these small altercations and then you get slapped a 50K bail. So sometimes it's just good to avoid such altercations, but well, they are unavoidable, so it's good to know what to do when that happens. The other case I'm looking at today is 2 brothers who were charged with stealing 154 million. They were charged with stealing over 154 million from the collapsed Dubai Bank Kenya Limited in an incident that happened 14 years ago. If there was ever a case that serikali ina mkono mrefu ndio hii sasa, because 14 years ago, this is now being heard now. So clearly they just don't fade away. So State Prosecutor Angela Fuchaka charged Kirpal Singh and Amarjit Singh with conspiracy to commit a felony, stealing and handling of stolen property. Please note that these 2 brothers, one is 78, the other one is 72, and they are in court for this charge instead of enjoying retirement peacefully. So the brothers, who are directors of Camp General Engineers Company, are alleged that between July 14th, 2009 and September 1, 2015, jointly with other people before the court, I think, they conspired to defraud the collapsed bank of 148 million. They denied the charges and were released on a cash bail of 1 million Kenya shillings. The other case is on the Gachagua trial. The other 9 people who were charged with the Madeira MP, Rigathi Gachagua, they pleaded not guilty to conspiracy to defraud the Nyeri County of 27 million and fraudulent acquisition of a 6 million shilling supply of a dialysis machine to Nyeri General Hospital. I keep getting flabbergasted by this thing that people just took money for a dialysis machine for other things. So in count 1, William Wahome, Anduta, Julian Jahenda, Samuel Murimi, Grace Wamboi, Lawrence Kimaru, remember there were 9 people, Irene Waboi, David Nyangi, and Rapid Medical Supplies Limited are jointly accused of conspiracy to commit the offense of corruption. In count 2, David Nyangi and Rapid Medical Supplies Limited are also accused of fraudulent acquisition of public property. So all 9 accused pleaded not guilty to the charges, where a total of 33.5 million Kenya shillings was lost. They were released on varied bail and bond terms ranging from 500,000 to 3 million. The case will be mentioned again on 9th of August 2021. I believe you and I are following this closely to see how it goes because there's a lot of talk around it, including the politics. All right, the other case I'm looking at is about the trader who shot 2 police officers. I think it was on Kiambu Road. A businessman charged with attempting to murder 2 police officers and a waitress at a city hotel in Nairobi was freed on a 10 million bond. The prosecuting counsel, Ms. Evelyn Onunga, submitted that Dixon Mararo shot and injured Police Constable Festus Musyoka, who was in the company of Lawrence Muturi and a waiter Felistas Nziza, at Quiver Lounge Restaurant on July 2nd, 2021. He denied the attempted murder charges and was granted a 10 million bond with one surety of the same amount and an alternative cash bail of 5 million. He was directed to deposit his passport in court. Remember, one of those terms you talked about and conditions that the court can put on you is you deposit your passport in court, especially if you're a flight risk. So further, the firearm of the accused will remain with the relevant arms bureau. The case will be heard again on 20th September 2021. The other case that was in court this week was about the Willie Kimani murder trial. A DCI witness, Officer Nicholas Olesena, told the court of how they had intel that led to the arrest of the accused in the Willie Kimani murder trial. Olesena told the court that the accused were using different numbers, with two of them having been registered the night before the murders at a shop in Mlolongo. The officer said he does not doubt that the evidence they collected, including DNA samples, cigarette butts, and phone data, collaborated with the confession given by Peter Ngugi, who is a fifth accused. So Ngugi said he had been given a new line by Frederick Leilman, the first accused, that he could use to contact him. 4 AP officers, Frederick, Stephen, Sylvia, and Leonard Mwangi, and police informer Peter Ngugi have been charged with the murder of lawyer Willie Kimani, Joseph Mwerori, and Josephat Mwendwa. The hearing resumes on 6th of September this year. So that's just about it from the courts. We just give you a few highlights of what really piqued our interest this week. But then there's more that has happened. You can definitely just go through maybe the papers or the social media and see what has been happening. So today we are going to talk about elections. We're going to talk about hate speech. And well, I have 3 very distinguished guests who are going to give us their expert advice on exactly what we want to discuss today. So hate speech and of course electoral justice, they come up during elections. And elections are known to be emotive. Elections raise anxiety. I know for a fact I get so anxious just around election time. And we know why, because we have suffered a lot in the past because of injustices, because of election violence, because of course, campaigns. And the drums are beating right now. Campaigns are on, almost just full gear. There's this joke that in Kenya, we start campaigns well soon after elections. When we finish our elections, things start, we start campaigning. So we have been campaigning, but now the drum beats are louder and we are hearing things and people are campaigning and people are drawing the lines about exactly where they want to stand. So we want to talk about hate speech. We want to talk about electoral justice. And with me, I have some very important guests, like I mentioned before. I want to give them a chance to introduce themselves because it's better when you hear from the people. And it's a man panel, like they're just men, but forgive me for that. Next time we look for ladies to just complete the picture. So I want to have them introduce themselves. I want to start from my immediate. I want you to introduce yourself, Mr. Chalo. Karibu sana to the show.
My name is Chalo Mwengi. I work with the National Cohesion and Integration Commission as the head of legal. Glad to be here.
Oh, karibu sana. Thank you so much for making the time to come to join with us. Steve, you're not a visitor, lakini jiseme.
Thank you so much, Anita. Yeah. My name is Steve Ogola. Yeah. I'm an advocate of the High Court and a managing partner in the law firm of Saroni and Stevens Advocates.
Karibu tena again, and thank you so much for making time.
Asante.
Our host.
Thank you very much for having me here. Yeah. My name is Mark Barasa, Acting Senior Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, the head of Hate Speech and Electoral Justice Division at ODPP. Thank you very much.
So hate speech is very serious. There's even a head of hate speech. So we are taking this seriously this time round. I hope so. So maybe I'll just start with you and tell us the mandate of the ODPP in as far as this is concerned, before we get into the definitions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. The ODPP, the mandate of the ODPP, the DPP is established under the Constitution of Kenya. That is Article 157, which establishes the Director of Public Prosecutions. And we also have the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Act. Therefore, the DPP exercises state functions of prosecution. And under Article 157, the DPP can also direct the Inspector General of Police to investigate when there is a complaint about commission of a crime. Under the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, in conducting his powers of prosecution, the Director of Public Prosecution can also call upon any public agency to cooperate and give information which is necessary for the carrying out of his duties, of the duties of the public Director of Public Prosecution. So therefore, his mandate is drawn from Article 157 of the Constitution of Kenya, insofar as conducting state prosecutions is concerned. And hate speech is a crime, and therefore the role of the DPP comes in directing investigations and in making the decision to charge. That is how he draws, where he draws his mandate from.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. And maybe I'll just now come back to you, Mr. Chalo, the mandate of the NCIC.
Thank you, Anita. The commission is established under the National Cohesion and Integration Act, which is number 12 of 2008, with a mandate to promote national cohesion by the elimination of all forms of ethnic discrimination. Within the Act, we have 3 sections that are very core to the work we do. The first being Section 7.2, which prohibits public institutions of having more than 1/3 of its employees coming from the same ethnic group. And that's why we do the annual ethnic audits for all public institutions. Then we have Section 13 and 62, which are the most dicey. The 13 is on hate speech, and Section 62 is on ethnic contempt.
Oh, okay.
Of course, it would be very important to note that under Section 61(2), it has become kind of a bottleneck, because it says that after investigations and the commission is convinced that an offense has been committed, then it shall make all reasonable endeavors to have the matter reconciliated. So you can see Kenyans are really not happy at times. Yeah. They think this conciliation process is a result of compromise by the suspects, but that's the law.
Okay.
Thank you.
So then, just for definition purposes, how do you define what is ethnicity and what is tribalism? I mean, where do you draw the line? And is there anything like positive? Is there anything positive from ethnicity, or it's all negative?
Well, ethnicity in itself is very positive. There's nothing wrong by belonging to an ethnic group. It's just the way it has been used in our context, pitting against one tribe against the other.
Yeah.
But in terms of ethnicity, in our act, it has been defined to include race, gender, and ethnic discrimination.
Okay.
Yes.
Tribalism?
Tribalism forms part of ethnicity. A tribe is an ethnic group. So the line is it's just an issue of semantics.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned ethnicity, I remembered, I think someone wrote a book about ethnicity and said there's nothing positive. Must have been Koigi Pamwere. There's a book he wrote about there's nothing positive about ethnicity.
Well, I beg to disagree. Our neighbors here in Tanzania have more than 147 ethnic groups. And they don't.
Positive for
yes,
them.
Very positive. Actually, it stops at the medical records.
Yeah.
That's the only place you asked your tribe or ethnic group.
Oh, okay, interesting. I think that we need to get something correct about how we define ethnicity and tribalism. So the other question I have, sorry, I'm asking to you because your statement is quite telling. So what happens when you do an audit? Because you've seen this thing in the media, despite you saying there's the mandate of doing audits and seeing the ethnic compilation of maybe an office or a public organization, what happens when you find they are all Luos in one organization?
Well, first, it's quite unfortunate that discrimination on ethnic basis was outlawed, but there were no sanctions provided for under our act. So we have only 2 sections within the NCI Act that have penal sanctions. That is hate speech and the offense of ethnic contempt.
Okay.
But after we carry out the ethnic audits, we engage the public institutions so that they come up with strategies on how they are going to achieve ethnic balance within the institution.
Yeah.
But there is no punishment provided for. We have made some proposals to Parliament so that sanctions are provided for. So at least the duty bearer, the CEO and the board can be held to account, maybe by being stopped from holding a public office for a certain number of years, or even being sacked from office.
Okay, has that happened?
The bill is still pending in Parliament.
Okay.
Towards the end of the last Parliament, these proposals were still pending, but unfortunately, they only picked the sections that speak to the appointment of our commissioners, but they never looked at other proposals.
Okay.
Currently, it is still pending. We have a very progressive Senate. We have a bill supported by Pereno that also seeks to provide for penal sanctions for CEOs or boards that are found not to promote cohesion. And also the County Governments Act has been amended. Now every county public service board is required to come up with strategies on how they are going to achieve balance within their institutions.
Okay. I hope it's achievable. I hope they get to do that. So Steve, just now coming back to the topic of the day. Democracy, elections, and with elections there must come disputes, and because you're democratic, you have to be heard. Is the electoral justice possible? Is it happening here in Kenya? Do we have it active in Kenya?
Thank you so much, Anita. First of all, we need to understand what electoral justice
What is it, first
really
of all?
is.
Yes, yeah.
But before then, allow me to just input on something from what the panelists have said.
Yes.
There's a disturbing pattern of overinvestment in the law. We tend to over-legislate. And now, curiously, we're even legislating on values. You know, isn't that curious that you have to legislate on values? What constitutes a nation of values? Yeah. What constitutes good manners? What constitutes what acceptable conduct? Then, you know, it takes away the national identity, what makes us Kenyans. I think what makes us Kenyans need not to be referred to in the law. I look at Article 10 and say, oh my goodness, these are the national values and principles of good governance. Now I'm bound by them. I'm supposed to internalize. If you know what the spirit of the Kenyan spirit, we talk about the Kenyan spirit, should not be hidden in the pages of statutes. The Kenyan spirit should be hidden in our hearts and should be practiced. If we did that, maybe the DPP would have little work to do in the context of electoral justice. And maybe NCSC would have a little to do, but you see now...
We won't even have NCIC.
we still have to just for standardization and so on and so on. There's a very important institutions that we have, but in the context of electoral justice, I think electoral justice has been mischaracterized and misunderstood, branded as an activist phrase or just some buzzword that is used to whip up emotion and to direct people towards protest. We are demanding electoral justice. Electoral justice, at the very minimum, just means making sure that the integrity of the vote is respected and protected. Nothing more than that. That you have a chance to cast your vote, and once you cast your vote, that vote will be given the meaning that was intended by the voter. That if I cast my vote, it will have the intended impact of translating into decision-making on who governs us and how we are governed. That is what electoral justice is about, making sure that the integrity, credibility, and the purity of the electoral process is preserved at all levels. I think when we talk about electoral justice, there are a lot of overemphasis on the institutions managing the elections and a little bit of, we tend to neglect, we tend to neglect the other key players, the voter, the civil society, and people just within our context. They play a bigger and better role in terms of promoting electoral justice, because first of all, if now we have 12 months to election, if the Kenyan citizens are properly sensitized, or the voters are sensitized that in the election period, you are using that period to assess the capabilities and the capacities of our proposed leaders, because then we will vote for them later, to know that when you cast a vote, you cast a vote of someone that is likely to reflect the values that we espouse as a nation. So you need to know those values.
Do we know them?
You know, in your heart, what is it that you care for as a Kenyan, and how does the candidate you want to vote for project that? How close is it those values? Then you go and vote for that person. Then number two, you must make a decision at a very personal level, not to be involved in electoral violence as part of agitation towards electoral justice. Because then, when you create a climate of fear, and a climate of fear is always created by political leaders, but with the support of of the voters.
Yeah.
There can't be a climate of fear unless somebody feels threatened. You see, when you feel threatened, how do you feel threatened? You feel threatened through hate speech, insightful talk. You feel threatened when you violate the law with violence, and then now the DP has to come in and arrest you. These are things we don't need to do. We should be looking forward towards elections, because elections in a perfect setting is supposed to help us to organize government. We say government is organized at the ballot. So it should be something like, it should be like we should look forward to elections the way we look forward to Christmas holidays.
Yeah.
Nobody approaches Christmas holidays
with fear,
with fear and anxiety. Why would you fear when you're approaching a period where you're organizing your government? But because there are people that manipulate the process, that fear. So when fear comes in, then you have institutional players like ODPP come and say, no. We will arrest and prosecute anybody who violates the law. We will watch out for people who perpetuate electoral hate speech. So to try and calm nerves, I think that's what we need to understand, that electoral justice is about making sure that the integrity of your vote is respected, and that vote is used to translate into a decision. If we understand it at that level, we will be okay.
But we don't get it at that level, because I think in the past, and history has shown, that you're made to believe that your vote counts. You know, and that's why there's voter apathy, if I may say. You'll get a majority of the voting population says, I voted last time for my person, we voted, they didn't come in. It ended up being mtu wetu, mtu wa kwetu. So who's supposed to make electoral laws? Who's supposed to, I mean, how do we get these values inculcated in us?
I think let me disabuse this notion that votes don't count. Of course, votes count.
They do.
Otherwise, how do we produce leaders? Votes count. And if you think votes don't count, if you feel your vote has not counted, the law has provided mechanism to interrogate your anxiety by way of filing an election petition. And there are many ways of making sure that your vote counts. The first way to make sure that your vote counts is to turn out and vote. Once you cast it, there's already a decent chance that your vote will count. How will your vote count if you don't vote? You have to vote.
Tell me something. Trust, public trust. How do we trust that our vote counts?
No. Thank you, Anita. And I'd like what Steve had just highlighted. We have a very interesting culture as Kenyans. Before the repeal of Section 2A, that is way back in 92, the former president, the late President Moi, used to say, once this thing, we open up the...
become democratic.
Yes. Then we are likely to have ethnic-based politics, and I think that has come to pass. Because since then, we started off with in some areas, line laws and envelope, right? Then again, it is within our psyche that our own man must win. For example, you said, just said that your vote does not count if your man does not win, and that is democracy. There are winners and losers. The majority will have their way, and the minorities will have their say. But in our process, electoral process, we are lacking that as Kenyans, that we don't appreciate the fact that in a democratic state, there is likely to be a loser. Right? Then now, back to the issue of trust. We need to have trust with the institutions that we have created. As a commission, we have a roadmap that speaks to the 2022 general elections. And among the key things is promoting trust between society and also society and the government. Then we are also having specific engagements with the community to enhance their capacity to appreciate the democratic space and also build their resilience so that they are not abused by members of the political class, being pitted against one ethnic group and another. Then we're also engaging members of the political class and also political parties so that they're able to have issue-based politics as opposed to ethnic-based politics. But again, as a society, we have a very interesting group.
We actually have bad manners, like Steve says. Why do we want an institution to tell us how to behave?
That is the challenge we have. But you see, when we had the post-election violence in 2007, 2008, several commissions were set up, but they realized these Kenyans have a peculiar habit. They need an institution that will constantly remind them of the need to have and hold values. And again, we have the 2010 Constitution that also gave us values in Chapter 10. So those are our own social or structural deficiencies, but we have institutions that are dealing with that, including NCIC, we have the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, we have the CAJ, we have the Human Rights, we have the NGEC, because these institutions add a lot of value. Currently, as we approach the 2022 elections, we have a multi-agency approach. We have brought together 9 institutions, that is IEBC, EACC, ORPP, ourselves, DCI, we have the CA, so that we have programs that will ensure we have a safe space to exercise our democratic rights, and also ensure that we have trust in the electoral process. I believe now IBC is having some commissioners come on board. We hope this will also help build the trust. But as Steve had said, as Kenyans, we need to interrogate ourselves as individuals, every one of us.
Self-meetings.
Yes, whether we have that value.
In us, yeah.
Yes.
So, Mark, just take us now through hate speech. What is hate speech? How do you define it?
Thank you very much, Anita. Just to reiterate what my 2 colleagues have said, the democratic will of the people is the basis of legitimacy for any government. And this is under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that is the basis of the legitimacy of any government, that this democratic will of the people, exercised either directly or through elected representatives and through regular elections, it is very, very important. And therefore, even at the global level, the Sustainable Development Goals, they look at a situation whereby development cannot take place unless there is peace. There can be no development unless there is peace, and there can also be no peace unless there is development. So the SDGs envisage a situation where there is inclusivity. These are the conditions that are necessary for development to take place. And therefore, inclusivity is very, very important. It's important that we subordinate our ethnic loyalties in favor of the state. A state is made up of many nations. Break that down a little.
Subordinate
our ethnic loyalties in favor of a state.
That legalese.
So we avoid looking at ourselves as tribes, but we look at ourselves as a state. We become loyal to the state. A state is made up of nations, the Luo nation, the Kikuyu nation, the Teso nation. These nations don't follow geographic boundaries, but a state has a defined territory like Kenya, made up of many nations, made up of a government, made up of people, different people. So for us to be successful, for us to develop, we must subordinate these ethnicities and look at ourselves as Kenyans and hold these regular elections the way we've been holding. And therefore, the role of institutions is very key, as opposed to individuals. In the USA, the recently concluded elections in the US, there was some chaos at Capitol Hill, you remember? And there was a period of anxiety. But being a mature democracy, it was able to move on because of strong institutions, which are not loyal to an individual, but they are keen to protect the people and the state. And therefore, as institutions, since 2010, we have many institutions which have been established under the Constitution. My learned friend Kialo has just mentioned them. These institutions need to be strong. They need to be courageous to protect the state, not individuals. And therefore, that is the only way we can be able to move on and develop within that peaceful environment as Kenyans. And therefore, to come back to your question on hate speech, this is verbal, when someone makes verbal utterances which are meant to dehumanize, to victimize a certain group of people or an ethnic group, that is hate speech. It can either be verbal, or it can also be through conduct, or even through publishing, for example, that aims to victimize, to dehumanize, to discriminate an ethnic group, a class of people, then that becomes hate speech. So those are the ingredients you look for under the National Cohesion and Integration Act, as Mr. Kialo has stated.
So despite us having all these institutions, and we trust our institutions, I mean, you saw the last elections, the disputed one, we stood still and waited for the institutions to work, but still there's still public distrust in how the institutions work. And maybe the question we need to answer ourselves, or to get whatever to, is how do we build public trust in these institutions ahead of the 2022 general elections, as the institutions that are involved in this election process? So maybe Steve, I'll ask, freedom of speech and hate speech, where do you draw the line?
First of all, how to build institution, the credibility and public trust in those institutions is just to respect the constitutional and statutory mandate that those organs have. I mean, there's a constitutional commission or an institution created and given powers to perform certain functions. Even the law itself says the presumption of regularity until it's shown otherwise. You have to trust that the ODPP, NCIC, and all other institutions, including IBC, set out to do the right thing. Because trust cannot be legislated, it can't be litigated. But also, if you talk about trust, if you are stuck in the past where you believe institutions are manipulable, they don't do the right thing, does it even matter that those institutions are working the right way? They won't change. So I think we have to solve such. And not fault find at every moment these are institutions. If you don't support them, you don't trust them, then you will weaken them. But you also need them.
Yeah,
you
you're
get.
Right,
I think what I think we missed, you have to reset your question, but I thought I needed to clarify this. The reason why there's tension every time we head towards the election is because we don't look at elections as an opportunity to get the best people who can provide the services. We look at election as an opportunity to organize for power. And why do we organize for power? Because we believe when we elect our leaders, they will go there and collect and bring to us a share of the national cake. So if your leader is not winning, especially at the presidency and the gubernatorial level, there's a very huge struggle for control of resources. You want to be co-opted in the club of resource managers, because if your person is there, you will get development. I think the Constitution has done the best it can ever do to disabuse that notion, to disperse power and functions and resources. We have to now disinherit the old mindset and make peace with the fact that when you put the ballot, whoever comes out, emerges as the winner, will provide services equally, and if he doesn't, there are mechanisms for holding him to account. But if our leaders don't want that, because political propaganda mobilizes support quickly than conversations on ideologies and issue-based talk. So you'll be told, well, you're not there until I am there, because I represent you. So that creates some level of desperation. Then when these leaders were not inspired by service, but are inspired by personal aggrandizement, just wealth accumulation, when they sense they're losing, they go back to their constituency. And they tell them, our victory is being stolen, and so on and so forth. The people need to understand that sometimes the people who present themselves to be elected at the ballot do not necessarily represent public interest, that they are advancing a personal, private agenda using a public platform. So that risk remains alive. And because when that risk is threatened, they may want to manipulate you. So once you're aware and properly sensitized, then you can begin to resist. You can resist incitement. You can resist mobilization along ethnic lines. Say, no, I won't do that. If we want to move forward in terms of improving the space in which you operate during an election period, I would say very strongly that we target the low-hanging fruits. And I've said this before. The low-hanging fruits is to have a conversation with Kenyans and tell them, look at what happened in South Africa. After mass looting and protest over Zuma's arrest, former president's arrest and incarceration, reality set in that life has to go on. You've destroyed food stores, you've destroyed businesses, you don't have jobs, you don't have hospitals, you don't have, you have to ask yourself this mob psychology that moves us to destroy ourselves. Then after that, there's maybe a conversation how to rebuild. If you're going to have a conversation how to rebuild a nation, then why dismantle it in the first place? I think that we have to look at what we are doing is not working for us. So we have to look at ways of doing things differently. How we are doing things now is that if I'm told we are mobilized along ethnic lines, then we are told we are losing the election because it's being stolen, we fight back, eventually we come and make peace, shake hands, and so on. I think what we need to do going forward, and institutions need to strengthen conversations, reframe the conversation, make it more reflective so that people can see that there's a distinct separation between public interest and personal interest. And sometimes our leaders put personal interest ahead of public interest. And when things go wrong, they don't get to pay, you get to pay. But so I think that background and context needed to be clarified.
And it's quite clear. I think the back also stops with me as a citizen.
But that is not to de-emphasize the role of the law. Actually, if you look at, and part of the things that Kenyans now need to understand, when we have the electoral laws, yeah, we have the Constitution, Elections Act, Election Offences Act, and look at the movement between the relationship between the Elections Act and the Election Offences Act. That Election Offences Act is enforced by the DPP. NCSC is part of the election laws during Election Act, NCSC Act, yeah. Initially, sometimes in 2011, when we had the Elections Act of 2011, the Election Offences Act, the Election Offences was a chapter, either chapter 5 or chapter 6 within the Elections Act. Then we say, because election violence is still, is still deep, and let's pull it from the Elections Act and make it a standalone law. Then we pulled the election offences from the Elections Act and created a new law known as the Election Offences Act 2016. Violence and intimidation and hate speech deepened. We said, no, maybe we need to take it back to the Elections Act. I want to tell Kenyans, no amount of legislation, no amount of prosecution, no amount of litigation will improve our electoral space if Kenyans don't want to change it. At one point, this office cannot arrest 1 million Kenyans and prosecute them. So prosecution is very good to punish offenders, but we need a more robust and impactful approach, which is to have a conversation with Kenyans. And I always tell Kenyans, personally, don't think I don't have preferences. I have preferences in every election because I vote. Yes. All of us do. But you will never see me after casting the vote loitering in a polling station. What for? You won't see me carrying a twig protesting. What for? You won't see me carrying a stone and pelting people. What for? Because you see, after I've protested, after I've thrown stones, after I've broken windows and destroyed people's bodies, eventually I will do that which I ought to have done in the first place, which is to find out, are there mechanisms to channel my grievance through? And those mechanisms exist, and they're telling us, these mechanisms, can we use those mechanisms to deal with our grievances? The ones that are legitimate. The ones that are illegitimate and serve a collateral agenda, which is always the personal agenda, those ones can we reject? I think if we get that level, election will be like Christmas. Looking forward to it.
The election is like Christmas. So tell me, I was asking, is freedom of speech absolute? Is it?
It cannot be absolute. You see, if you look at Article 25 of the Constitution, I should carry in mind, but Article 25 of the Constitution gives you a short list of freedoms, of rights, fundamental rights that may not be limited. Slavery or servitude. I think it also includes, we need to look at it. The right to fair trial.
Yeah.
And there are very few. I think they're just maybe torture, yeah? Torture. They are like just 4 or 5 fundamental, the 6, yeah?
Yes.
We will confirm. 4 or 5 fundamental that may not be limited is there under Article 25 of the Constitution. All other rights may be exercised subject to necessary limitations that are needed in a democratic society, provided that there's a legitimate aim for that limitation. Of course, freedom of speech is needed so that people can articulate and express themselves, because it helps to shape public opinion. Yes. But freedom of speech is not the same thing as freedom to incite people to violence. Freedom of speech is not the same thing as promoting propaganda. There's propaganda that is acceptable because that is politics. Like, for instance, telling someone that he stands for nothing, he has never stood for anything, I am the one who stands for something, and you can trust me. I mean, that's useful propaganda.
Yeah.
But there's harmful propaganda that says that so-and-so is a dangerous candidate. If you elect him, this country will go up in flames. I think NCSC has a greater job to play in that aspect, because people have realized, our leaders have realized, that the easier way to mobilize support is to inflame and to incite, inflame and incite and excite the passions of the voters. Tell them, listen, we are only safe in this corner.
Yeah.
I think if you participate in such forum where people tell you conversation, you know that there is hate speech. If it makes you feel agitated, you know, you can have a working definition that you don't need to remember, look at the law all the time. If it makes you feel agitated or it leaves you angry towards someone, you know that you're now crossing the boundary of distant communication and going into incitement. That can't be allowed, because every country and every person has some residual capacity for barbarity. In 2007, 2008, Kenya showed that they have actual capacity for barbarity.
Yes,
we can ban, kill them. So we have to nip it in the bud as soon as it begins to rear its ugly head.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel unsafe, then you know that's hate speech.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel angry at someone, and it makes,
that's hate speech.
I think what our leaders need to do and tell us, and vote, if leaders can't tell us, let us tell it to ourselves. The reality is this. In this next election, because I'm a private practitioner, I'm not, you know, these gentlemen are constitutional office holders, they may be more reserved and more cautious in the manner, in the choice of language.
Yeah.
But I can say this, yeah? You have Raila Odinga, William Ruto, Kalonzo Musyoka, Mudavadi, Gideon Moi, and maybe Wetangula. As sure as the sun, Mukisa Kitui as well, as sure, and Mwale Mudida,
yes.
as sure as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, one of the president will come from one of those gentlemen.
Yes.
Now you need to make peace with that first. That your favorite candidate, be they William Ruto, Raila Odinga, Kalonzo, Weta, and so, may not be the president.
And make peace with that.
Make peace with that first.
Yeah.
The politician won't tell you to make peace with that, because then it takes the fighting power away from them.
Yeah.
Once you make peace with that, you make peace with the fact that you can trust the person who emerges the victor to do the right thing. Number 3, you can make peace with the fact that if the person entrusted with power fails to do the right thing, the institutions that are mandated to intervene and make sure that they are held accountable. I feel so sad when I see people bastardizing the ODPP for doing their job. He read Article 157 and the ODPP Act, a specific mandate to prosecute offenses.
Yes.
Corruption is an offense.
It is.
Okay, what do you want? You want the DPP to do their work, but you don't want them to fight corruption. You can't approbate.
You want to help them at the vote as well.
You can't approbate and reprobate this institution's mandate. You want NCSC to work, but when they arrest your favorite politician, you are up in the streets. I mean, Kenyans. This is a common sense conversation.
It is, yeah. So, Chalo, yes.
Just before we move out from hate speech and the freedom of expression and Article 33, we have 4 derogations: incitement to violence, propaganda for war, hate speech, and there's a 4th one that I cannot quickly remember from the top of my head. Then we have the issue of hate speech as defined within our Act. It's any utterances that is abusive, threatening, insulting, and is likely to incite ethnic violence. Then we have 62 that speaks to ethnic contempt. Any utterances or behavior that incites feelings of ethnic contempt, then is a violation of the law. That is what I wanted to clarify in terms of it. But again, as Kenyans and the values we have, we must stop glorifying hate speech.
Yes.
We have seen what happens with our groups when one of us is charged.
Yes.
If, for example, if it is Olekina, you'll have men in shukas in their thousands.
In town.
Where they come from, you don't
You
know.
don't know, yeah.
If it is the likes of Moses Kuria, you will see what happens.
Yes.
I don't know whether these people are usually ferried to the courts.
Yeah.
There's an incident where one of these guys went and even sat in the magistrate's seat before the court started.
Yeah, sure.
So it even leads to some kind of intimidation
Yeah.
to the judicial officers
yes.
and also the prosecutors
Yeah.
and our investigators. Some of them have to go to court disguised. Thank you.
So you talked about insulting speech. Is insulting speech the same as offensive speech? And where do you draw the line between offensive and hate?
No, you see, the punch word is incite feelings of ethnic. So those insults must incite feelings of ethnic hatred, not just regular insults. Abuses are abuses, but within Section 13, those utterances might be abusive, insulting, threatening, with a likelihood of stirring up ethnic violence.
Yeah. Is there a lawful hate speech?
No, there cannot be anything like hate speech
Lawful, that is lawful.
But what has happened universally, there is no a standard definition of what constitutes hate speech. Each jurisdiction has given ingredients that would constitute the offense of ethnic or rather hate speech within their context. In our context, it brings issues of ethnicity.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So you do the investigative bit of it, of
Yes.
this whole thing, and then you prosecute. So how do you make the decision to charge in hate speech cases?
Thank you very much, Anita. Just to reiterate what my two colleagues have said, every individual has a residual capacity to barbarity. To echo my learned friend, that is a classical English philosopher Thomas Hobbes in his magisterial work known as Leviathan, whereby he says that we must subordinate again our individual and ethnic interest in favor of a bigger being known as Leviathan, and that is the state to protect all of us. So long as we continue in our individual interests and our ethnic interests, we cannot achieve development. So we have to subordinate those ethnic and individual interests. As institutions established under the Constitution, we want to tell Kenyans to be confident in these institutions which belong to them, which are funded by taxpayers. Whoever becomes president of this wonderful republic, we are going to ensure that government works. A person, however good he is, if there are no institutions in place, that person cannot be able to perform. If you go and bring Barack Obama and you make him president of a country where there is a lot of lawlessness, where there is no rule of law, where electoral justice is absent, that Barack Obama will not be able to perform. He was able to perform in the US, not because we don't have Barack Obama here in Africa. We have had very good leaders like Patrice Lumumba in the DRC. But what happened to him? Some of us were used by the outsiders, intrusive forces, to kill him. He was killed, his body burnt in sulfuric acid, only his teeth survived, and they were taken to Belgium. This is a classic example of ethnicity and divisions. So when we are divided, we cannot proceed, we cannot develop as a continent and as a country. And therefore, for us to become like those developed nations in the West, we must emulate what they have done. We have good leaders here in Africa, but it is institutions, the role of institutions. It is for us institutions to be courageous, to do, the law is already there, as my learned colleague has said. We don't need to over-legislate. Rwanda had very good legislations, but the genocide still happened. So we don't need to over-legislate. Institutions, we are telling Kenyans that we are going to remain strong. We have what it takes under the law. We are going to use the law. We are going around engaging in publicity the way we are doing now on social media. For the ODPP, we have offices in every county, 47 offices in all counties, even sub-counties. We are closer to the people. We do not discriminate whether it's a man or a woman who comes to us with a complaint. We receive those complaints. We are accessible to the people. We engage them. We are even going to establish hotlines during the election so that if there is any complaint, we receive it, we forward it to the NCIC, to the IG. So we want to tell Kenyans that we are there for them as institutions, to protect them, to ensure that government works. It doesn't matter who becomes president. You will be able to get public goods and services regardless of your tribe, regardless of your nationality or ethnicity. We are going to make sure that we move on as a country and we become an example, not only in East Africa, but in the entire region. So as institutions, we are going to work very hard to ensure that it happens. When it comes to your question on hate speech,
Decision to charge.
yes, thank you. Hate speech is when people weaponize public discourse for political gain. And when we are making that decision to charge, we normally apply the 6-part test. It's also known as the Rabat principle. These are a set of principles which were developed by a committee of experts under the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. We realized that under the International Convention on Civil and Political Liberties, ICCPR, of which Kenya is a party, a state party, Kenya has ratified that convention. As Mr. Kialo has said, hate speech or freedom of expression under Article 33(2) of our Constitution is limited. It's not absolute. And therefore, when we are looking at hate speech and making the decision to charge, we look at the context, political and social context under which that speech was made. We look at the status of the person who made that speech. That speech. We look at the likelihood of violence, the propensity of that speech to cause violence. We also look at the content of what that person said. So these are the things we look at before making that speech. Who is the person who made that speech? What were the political and the social context? Also, we also look at the political and social context, the status of the person making the speech. Is there a likelihood of violence or racial, ethnic violence occurring as a result of that speech? And therefore, sometimes it is also necessary to have experts like anthropologists who can come to court and testify that those words which were uttered, even if they don't mention a community, because some of these people who are
They don't have to mention.
They don't have to mention. We can call an anthropologist in court and testify that indeed that speech was likely to incite ethnic contempt. So we are going to be on the lookout these coming elections. We've learned a lot from the previous elections. We are warning those people who are who are likely to engage on hate speech, whether online or in public, that our eyes are very open this time. We are widely looking at them. We will not care which party you belong to, which tribe you belong to. We do not choose who to prosecute. We look at the evidence. So if the evidence comes to us, we will not care who you are. We are going to ensure that you don't burn this country. So that is the confidence that we want to inspire in Kenyans.
Yeah. So Mr. Chalo, being I think the most important in this context of hate speech, your institution is quite important. So at what point do you forward a file to the ODPP and say this one now has to go forward? Because I heard your chairman say that in terms of hate speech, someone is given 3 strikes. And I felt like, and I was discussing with someone, that is quite soft. So at what point do you criminalize this and say this one goes forward to the courts?
Well, thank you, Anita. Before I respond to that, I would like to highlight a few issues on matters, what we're doing as an institution in terms of fast-tracking hate speech cases. One, we are engaging the judiciary so that they set up special hate speech cases, like we have the election cases, and have timelines, so that within 6 months, we are able to have a matter heard and concluded. Why is this? We have instances where we have matters pending in court since way back 2016, 2015. Yes, not even that. You find that upon plea taking, a suspect moves to the High Court and gets conservatory orders until the matter is heard and determined at the High Court, challenging sometimes the prosecutory powers,
Yeah.
or even the way the matter has been handled. And once these orders are obtained, then the matter goes to sleep.
Yes.
We have a case in Mombasa that has been pending since 2015. That is what informs our request to.
And also that makes the public not trust
Yes.
what you do. Yeah.
Even some of these witnesses will die as a result, or some
Yeah.
of them will even forget
What was said.
Yes, that is. It also
Yeah.
gives time for the suspects
Yeah.
to reach some of these witnesses and
Yes.
buy them off.
Yeah.
We have that challenge. Sometimes we even for the witnesses and the protection also get fatigued and they move out of these safe houses.
Yes.
Then that's a challenge. In terms of capacity for our prosecutors, currently we have 10 on secondment from the office of DCI, that is Directorate of Criminal Investigations. We have only 10 covering the whole country, but what we have been doing is to enhance the capacity of DCI officers at the region so that they are able to have the capacity to investigate cases. We have a huge challenge with the issues of digital and electronic evidence.
Yes.
Section 106B of the Evidence Act has given very stringent measures for this evidence to be admissible. So you need quite a well-trained investigation, and also some of the equipment they use for storage. For example, if you have a disk or a CD that has content that you intend to use in courts and you don't store it properly,
Yeah.
in terms of it will be affected by magnetic fields or even lose some of these things through these programs you use. But then in terms of investigations, once we receive a complaint under section 43 and 44, we have the mandate to receive and investigate cases of hate speech. We usually investigate, make sure that the evidence gathered is watertight. If it is digital evidence, it is packaged in a manner that it is admissible. And then we forward the complete files to the office of ODPP for interrogation, whether the evidence gathered discloses.
Isn't that the biggest challenge you have? Evidentiary test.
Yeah, it's not a big challenge because hate speech is just like any other offense, and investigators have the requisite skills. We have no challenge in terms of our prosecutors and the evidence we collect, save for the digital evidence.
Yeah.
So once this evidence has been gathered, we forward the files for review and prosecution to the office of the DPP.
Any conviction rate since?
Yes, we currently have 3 convictions on hate speech. We have 11 active cases before various courts across the country. We have over 130 pending cases of investigation. So we've made progress. It might appear quite minute, but
Yes.
it's progress we have done because
progress still,
it has
yeah.
also given us quite a huge deterrence effect.
Yeah.
Because nowadays you'd even hear politicians when they're speaking, they will begin by giving a warning that I hope this is not hate speech.
disclaimer.
But of course, yes, a disclaimer. But of course, again, they would hide it behind innuendos,
Yeah.
proverbs, and this kind of thing. But we are always out there in the monitoring the space, and we're also proactive. We don't wait for complaints to be filed. We also have monitors monitoring the public space. This is both the social gatherings and also the social media. Of course, we have seen a great move from public rallies into the social digital space.
Hasn't that affected how you investigate and work?
Well, yes and no, because now we have social media investigators who are constantly monitoring this space. Of course, we don't want our space to be more of a police state, but we also encourage members of the public to be aware of what they post on social media. We have given a lot of responsibility to website administrators for content. I know our law limits the freedom of expression as opposed to maybe the American context where you have free speech and you can say anything about me, including falsehoods. And the only recourse I have would be to file for defamation in a civil court. But in our context, yes, it has been criminalized, and we are really putting measures into place to ensure that there's no abuse of the freedom of expression.
When you listen to social media and see how it has changed how people operate, you've seen other countries shutting down social media during elections. Does it work? Is it something that can be employed here? If at all, we will not have our self meetings and say we will act responsibly. Do you think shutting down social would help this?
Not shutting down social media per se, but you can mute or censor some level of communication. I think the only gap that I see in the strategies proposed by the DPP and the NCAC, there's a lot of reliance on punishment. Punishment has its own limitations. Of course, punishment must be there because it's a very strong deterrent. I just wish that the election laws made it possible that if you are found guilty of an election offense, or maybe if IBC determined a candidate to have committed an election offense, to immediately disbar them from running. It's not there. Until then they would have to go to court to get an order of stay of that decision by the IBC. Then because you'd have to go to court and stop your campaign and battle in court whether you will get a stay or not, you may not get a stay, it may not be automatic because then IBC must be given a chance to explain itself. So the disruptive value and the inconvenience suffered by a candidate when he has been disbarred by IBC and he has to rush to court will slow down hate speech or other election offenses. But our laws are not as robust as we want them to be in terms of punishment. I think the reality of the matter is this. The people that incite violence usually have a huge political constituency. And if you have more than 2 or 3 people with huge political constituency inciting violence at the same time, it may be, in terms of practical effectiveness of prosecution as a tool for deterrence or punishment, there may be serious or significant limitations. For instance, legally, nothing stops the DPP from prosecuting the Big Five concurrently, provided there's an offense that has been disclosed and there's evidence and there's need to prosecute. You can arrest and prosecute Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, William Ruto, all these people except the president. You may prosecute all of them at the same time. But the reality is, in an election period, it is not possible, not strategic to prosecute Raila Odinga for hate speech because he has an active political constituency that he can mobilize quickly, the way we saw in South Africa, that can actually even disrupt peace itself, create more problems. So I think we're not saying that we let politicians run amok and do what they want, no. The first thing that must be done is this. Is there a plan to engage, and it can be done at a regional level. At the national level, those who want to run for president, can this multi-agency group have a meeting with political leaders running for president? Can they have a meeting with political leaders running for governors? Then and senators, because there are only 47 candidates. Can only be so many, because they only have 47 counties, and we have 47 counties for senators and governors. You can put them in a room, a sensitization workshop, where the multi-agency team speaks them and impresses upon them to conduct themselves in a manner that inspires confidence and supports peace and all that. Because if they don't do that, we'll arrest you and we'll prosecute you. But because we understand that you have a political constituency, once we arrest you within our mandate and we prosecute you, if you want to mobilize your supporters to come and protest and disrupt further, that's up to you. In this country, when it starts burning, it burns for everyone. It doesn't burn for a small corner. So then you have some commitments. When you make a moral appeal, it can inspire some leaders who would have otherwise incited others not to do so. The other thing now is to coordinate the rest of the candidates in their counties. I think they have DPP as regional officers, at the constituency level. Put all the candidates together and tell them to commit to observe peace and not to engage in conduct that is considered insightful. Then have another meeting that targets the voters. Like what you may consider as a citizen oversight forum. Create some champions, champions, peace champions, in the counties, in the constituencies, in the wards, that can map out and say, no. We love you, we will vote for you, but don't incite us. So that you disrupt as much as possible opportunities for hate speech before it happens, so that when it does happen, it is far in between. It's easy to prosecute. Few instances. I think again, and I'm not listening to, and I'm not getting this coming out clearly from NCSC. The church is the only institution, because we are a deeply religious state, yeah. The church, of course, our religious groups, the church and the mosques. The church is the only institution, or our religious institutions are the only other institution outside the political institution that have a near solid support constituency, a religious constituency. They have a political constituency.
Yeah.
The church at this time should step up its activities. Religious groups should step up their activities. The Catholic Church, for instance, I think majority of Kenyans are Catholics. And then, so tap into that. The Catholic for Peace and Justice Commission, something like that. Have them develop communication, infomercials, if you like. Let them start conversing with this when the people go to church and all that in groups, you know, so that they can make that passionate appeal.
They start now.
You know, and then link that work with this multi-agency team. Then let's get these peace champions within. If someone is arrested, let's have if you have been arrested within jurisdiction, the local pastor be the one to come and say, no, we will not support hate speech, so that when you have a lot of champions down there, it becomes easy to prosecute someone who has a political constituency, because prosecution is a necessary tool. If there is no prosecution, everybody will do what enters the imagination. There will be no peace. But prosecution in the context of electoral period has huge challenges, which you must appreciate, and those challenges, to address them, we will need other players other than the DPP. So I think that's where we can converse. And people like ourselves keep on making appeal to people who we interact with and tell them, listen, personally, I always tell Kenyans, I have the capacity to relocate from this country if this country is burning. Others don't have that capacity. So as I incite you to violence, probably my kids, my brothers, my siblings have already been evacuated. They're living in Tanzania. They're living in the US. I'm here fighting for you. Even this General Miguna.
He's not here.
No, he's not here. He's not here. But he's mobilizing. You know, I don't want to discredit his idea. I cannot competent to comment on his views. But remember, he's mobilizing from Canada. From abroad. Mukisa Kitui just came back from abroad. Do you know where his family is? Do you have a passport?
Yes.
You don't have a passport. You don't have your fate. You know, Kenya is a developing country, which means most Kenyans, out of the 45 million Kenyans, most of us are poor and disparate people. We don't have a chance, even if given, to relocate elsewhere.
Even to Tanzania.
Even to Tanzania. In fact,
you
can't even go. So you have to understand that this is the kind of conversation that people can relate with. If you tell them that in advance, then as they listen to their leaders inciting them, they will reflect. And that will have some disruptive value that, I think when things go bad, I'll be starving in this house with my children. The person I'm supporting will be evacuating their children. You get? I think that is so. Let
given strategy already.
Let it come out very strongly.
Anita, just a quick reaction to what my learned colleague Steve has said. I began by saying we are running several programs that target specific groups. We have programs that are targeting members of the political class and political parties, with a view of sensitizing them on the need to have issue-based politics as opposed to the ethnic kind of.
Slight progress in us going towards issue-based politics currently.
Yes and no, because one, I'll tell you for this, Kenyans love action. We had Shabal at some point before the 2017 general elections. He was addressing a rally where the president was seated. And he spoke for about 5 or so minutes without the crowd reacting. So he had to say something that would make the crowd react. And you remember he said what? That tutafanya kila kitu kushinda hii uchaguzi hata kama ni kuiba. Right? And the crowd was so excited. And so we are having these discussions to discourage that. We are also working closely with the clergy we have partnered with the NCCK and also the Interreligious Council of Imams, and also the one that brings all religions together, so that every Sunday or Friday they are speaking to their members. Yes.
Is there no is there decreased trust in those institutions in the church, for example? Because people feel like in the past they didn't do much. So
well, there's a bit of apathy because you've seen members of the public also complaining that now even these churches, we are there receiving money from politicians, and all you need is to donate and you'll have a platform on Sunday to speak to the congregants. So we also addressing this issue.
In fact, I had one clergy say one time back at home, he said, if I can only get XX politician to come and give us 1 million, si tutakuwa sawa.
Now,
despite them not believing in this guy.
That is Kenya for you.
Yes.
But now we are working with them closely to show them that they need to be role models within the community and the space they operate in. We are even asking for that space as a commission, that as a multi-agency task force, we have a space within those meetings on Sundays to discuss matters, peaceful elections, and how we are going to organize ourselves. We have previously had an engagement with the aspirants seeking the top office in the last general elections. We'll bring them together, talk to them and discourage them, and also ask them to talk to people who they are likely to finance or support in the process, so that they do not engage. We are coming up with a wall of fame and shame.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yes, for persons engaging with in hate speech, so that we shame them. But again, we also have
our level of shame is also, you see, goes back to our values.
Yes.
And really, in fact, I think they operate from the premise of any publicity is good for me. I need to be known.
Yes.
So they'll just get into the list of shame for publicity purposes. So how is that supposed to work?
Well, we'll do our bit, but we also want to change the mindset of Kenyans as a group, so that every individual appreciates the need to have a peaceful elections free of hate speech. Because when Kenya burns, it burns for everyone. You've heard Steve saying some of us have the capacity to relocate, others don't have. And it is that group that lacks the capacity that really wants this kind of engagement. But as a commission, we will not tire. As we speak, we are having an engagement in Nakuru County targeting youth. Last week, we had one in Mombasa and Kilifi targeting members of the political class. Of course, elders from Nyumba Kumi and district peace committees, so that they go back to the communities, the space they operate in, and preach peace and encourage members of the society to maintain levels of high integrity. I would love the day that you walk into a political rally, you spill hate and the crowd walks away.
That will be the day.
But as long as we are clapping for these people when they spill hate speech, then it's going to be a challenge. Of course,
like the bulk of the work then is on the citizens, on the voters, and not so much on the political class, because we enable them.
Yes, and we began by saying there is need to change the way Kenyans think, so that our values, Steve was speaking to our values. Do we need to have national values in the constitution, or issues of integrity in the constitution? Of course, it's a challenge, but the one that we need to deal with. And that's why the eminent persons who came to interrogate why we fought in 2007, 2008, identified our weaknesses as a group and made various recommendations, including having an institution that will have deliberate programs running to promote national cohesion and integration.
Okay, so Mark, just tell us a bit, is there alternative dispute resolution when it comes to cases like hate speech? Do you sometimes get to a point and say tuongee out of court?
Thank you very much, Anita.
Yeah.
The DPP under the Constitution has the discretion to charge. He makes the decision to charge.
Yes.
And in making the decision to charge, the Director of Public Prosecution has developed guidelines, policy guidelines, which have been disseminated widely to all prosecution counsel within the 47 counties across the Republic. They guide us when we are to make a decision to charge. So in making the decision to charge, we make several considerations. For example, is there sufficient evidence? And is it in public interest to make that decision to charge? Therefore, there are some considerations which we look at before making that decision to charge. It is not always that a case will come to us and automatically we will make that decision to charge. My learned friend, Mr. Ogola, has cited several examples. So it may not be in public interest to prosecute somebody. It may not be in public interest. And sometimes the evidence may not be sufficient.
In such cases?
So we do have alternative justice mechanisms.
Yes.
We do have a diversion policy. We do plea bargain. These are lawful processes which are allowed under the Constitution itself, under Article 159, alternative dispute resolution, and even under the National Cohesion and Integration Act, there are provisions for conciliation. So sometimes justice will be best arrived at through these alternative forms of dispute resolution outside the traditional judicial mechanisms. So judicial mechanisms is just one form of dispute resolution. It is not the main one.
When you look at the result of hate speech in countries like Rwanda, even now up to 7 PV, post-election violence, it feels like hate speech is so close to attempted murder because the result of it is crazy. So why would we have alternative?
Anita, it's not even attempted murder.
Yeah.
It's genocide.
See, so why are we soft on it?
Like currently, we look at our act.
Yeah.
The punishment is a fine of £1 million bob or imprisonment for a period of
3 years.
3 years, which makes it a misdemeanor. So
Yeah.
it's very keen that we also look at the regime in terms of punishment, because some of this is really, hate speech becomes quite a challenge.
Yeah.
It can lead to
Poison,
huge numbers in terms of loss of life.
Yeah.
But as my colleague has said, within the constitutional framework, it has provided or rather, the Constitution encourages judicial officers to use alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, as of course, in as much as they don't promote.
I mean, with speech, ukishasema ushasema.
Yes.
How do you take it back?
Speech, we need to strengthen that. I began by saying we have a challenge with Section 61(2). The terminology is shall. Shall. So in as much as our basic mandate is promote national cohesion through the elimination of all forms of ethnic discrimination, but it is also important to have the punishment for hate speech enhanced. It might lead to genocide.
Yes.
In the post-election violence, we've lost about 1,500 lives. It's not a small number in as much as, but it's very key. So as we undertake our work, we also appreciate that hate speech can lead us into a very, very bad situation in terms of peace.
Yes. Yeah.
I think what we need to do, we need to revive or accelerate the quest for national renewal, and that quest for renewal must start from the realization that Kenya is a rule of law country. As a rule of law country, it presupposes that we have laws that are enforceable, which means if those laws are contravened or broken, consequences will follow. So this is the conversation when Kenyans need to have. If we are to pride ourselves as the rule of law country, we need to understand that there must be sanctions that must follow for those violators. And when those sanctions follow, we need to understand that that is the due course of the law. The law taking is due course, and not that someone is being punished or victimized or targeted for political persecution, the way Kenyans like to put it. Number two, that the Constitution itself, if you look at Article 3, it says that every person has the right to defend the Constitution. Defending the Constitution means defending our national identity and our value system. How do you defend your value system? The easiest way to defend your value system, what you believe in as a country, as well as a nation, is to make sure that you actively promote what can be considered as shared aspirations, good things, but you also stay away or resist the temptation to undermine those values that are espoused in Article 10. So there's a bit of shared balance, it's a shared burden. As a Kenyan, I will actively ensure that if Kenya is to pride itself in a rule of law country, I must be sure that as an individual citizen, I do everything within my power to stay away from things that can break the law or demoralize or, if you like, undermine the law and the values that we believe in. But also, I will not also disrupt institutions who are lawfully performing their functions. I think I want us to prepare, the DPP, the NCSI, should be able to create some leaflets, information that says, this is our mandate. Our mandate will not be suspended just because we are in an election period. In the context of an election period, our mandate may take a decidedly different turn because we might end up prosecuting more election offenses than any other offenses because it's prevalent. This is the period where people campaign and people, vie for elections. So the principal mandate of prosecution remains. It's the nature of the cases being prosecuted that may change. We need you to understand that. We have been prosecuting offenses the last 4 years in the last electoral cycle. We are now in the last election, in the last year, now heading towards election. We will continue prosecuting cases, but you will see that the statistics of cases going to court will be more and more election related. It could be hate speech, it could be violence, it could be, all sorts of offenses, provided that an offense is disclosed, evidence available to support that prosecution, we will prosecute. If there is reason not to prosecute, we will defer that prosecution or we will refer it to any other mechanism in the usual way, because that happens a lot. Personally, I'm a great fan of tweeting for ODPP if something happens in our courts, especially the courts in the periphery. You go to courts that are unknown and you find a prosecution counsel that is unrecognized, uncelebrated, doing a great job. But you wait for one day when something wrong has happened, then you tweet about it, you post about it, but how come you don't talk about excellent things? Prosecutors on the ground, they look at the investigation files, they propose charges, the evidence, they say, no, I'm not going to prosecute this one. Your Honor, I pray that these charges now be terminated because I don't think I have evidence. Nobody recognizes that. But now, if it happens in small cases, small cases involving chicken thief, they get released all the time. It's just that they don't make news, prime-time news. But if the DPP terminates a case, in a corruption case, they say, oh my goodness, it's been compromised.
Then we start talking.
These things happen all the time. And even during election period, there might be hate speech. And I like the way he's put it. It's fiercely intelligent, very eloquent. I think we need to talk after that. But, the evaluation, he has calibrated a standard for hate speech. And it says, we will make a decision whether we're charging based on these items or not. I think so that already are saying that and those offenses haven't been committed. It's already well equipped. I think when I look at the mindset of the ODPP, it's nothing but praise, So when we see people making statements that are considered prosecutable and not getting prosecuted, you must understand that there may have been some other factors taken into account arriving at that decision, and so on and so forth. So bottom line is this. We want this multi-agency committee to prepare short information that people can work with, mandate of ODPP. This is what we'll do. These are the election offenses that we can prosecute. Let people be aware. NCS is a very specific and targeted. This is an expert commission. These guys get paid only to reflect on cohesion. How more expert can you be? For a whole time, now when we leave this meeting, I will dash to court or to a meeting. In my office, it's a full service law firm. Corruption case, I'm there. Criminal case, I'm there. You want a divorce, I'm there. Our children case, I'm there. All this. how can you genuinely imagine that a lawyer in private practice or a businessman whose core concern is how to make profit has a detailed understanding than someone who is paid to reflect on how to improve cohesion?
Yeah.
So when we have to have some level of respect for these offices that you have created. When he speaks on matters cohesion, he speaks, his sentiments reflect the totality of the data they have collected.
Yes.
The comparative learning, they do comparative, I hope they do comparative learning. They do comparative learning with other institutions, other countries, which I don't do because I'm not going to be paid for that. Yeah. So when NCIC speaks, they should tell Kenyans that, listen, we are a commission created by law with a specific mandate. We've been implementing this mandate. You are likely to see an escalation of our actions because we have studied the pattern in this country, and we can tell you that during the last 12 months of election, hate speech is likely to escalate. Why would you have a problem believing that? I mean, they say if the crocodile comes off the water and tells you delegate is unwell, why doubt it? They live there.
They live there. They know.
is an expert institution.
Yes.
If it tells you we sense a problem, why would you defer your opinion to a politician when there's an expert institution saying so? Political leaders, in fact, he's put it so well. But honestly, I didn't know you are engaged with political leaders. That's a good thing, yeah? And voters need to know that you've already engaged with their leaders and you've told them, listen, we don't want you to do ABCD. You can campaign, you can use positive propaganda, the one that creates humor.
Yes.
The one that make people relaxed, make people feel like going back to like positive gossip about what people can do. But stay away or refrain from what makes people go home feeling like, hey,
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid. Then target that, and the church and the civil society actors and lawyers have huge information capacity. Have conversations. Personally, the first thing I always do is I sensitize myself, then my family members, let's agree at a family level. I have brothers and sisters. They have children, I have nephews and nieces. My parents are alive. I tell them, at the family level, if you have the name Ugola, let's agree, let's commit to each other. If we are not in control of those who want to throw stones, that's not a decision we can make for them. But we can make a decision for ourselves. Even if this country is burning, there won't be an Ogola in there. Someone that has our heritage, our blood running through their veins. They won't be there. We have made peace with that. If every family conversation can mainstream what is needed to be done, then, and as he said it, politicians will come to rallies and they realize that then they will begin to change. And you say something very important about, is it possible to have an issue-based political campaign? The short answer is yes.
Yes.
The hustler narrative is now being taken by both sides. Those are against it, those who are for it. We are debating it. And at least for once, we're not talking about the ethnic identity of our national leaders. The rallying call seems to be on the cost of living and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that is a good place to stop it from my side. I think
so too.
We can work it from there.
So quickly, I just go onto social. Kemo says, and following the conversation is very enlightening. Then Luke has some questions. Can hate speech alternate with slander in defamation? Anyone?
Okay, I would like to take that one. First of all, we've mentioned genocide when making the decision to charge. So hate speech and genocide are different because genocide is dealt with under the International Crimes Act. It's an international crime.
Is almost because it leads to.
It can lead to it leads to genocide. We treat it differently. We treat it very differently. So genocide is quite serious, and it's treated very differently, unlike hate speech.
And that's why we had the team that were taken to The Hague for genocide.
Yes.
So hate speech and genocide are
different.
So slander and defamation is also different from hate speech.
Okay.
Because slander and defamation, it does not have the element of inciting ethnic hatred or victimization of a certain ethnic group, unlike hate speech.
It's about a person. Who is a complainant in hate speech?
The person offended, or in criminal law, once a complaint has been received, it becomes the state, and then anybody affected becomes a witness.
Okay.
But it is important to note from the recently concluded by-elections, you saw very few cases of hate speech. Actually, most of them were incitement to violence. And we have a challenge with this. Section 96 was declared unconstitutional by the High Court recently. We are expecting the AG through the office of the DPP to quickly recraft that provision so that, again, it's within, it is still an offense. So within our statutes, we don't have an offense known as incitement to violence, Section 96.
We need it.
Which is a very huge lacuna now if we go to elections without that provisions, because DCI is struggling with finding now another offense that, but if you look at the ingredients of that offense, it's purely incitement to violence.
Okay. Is hate speech a felony or a misdemeanor?
From our context, is a misdemeanor.
Okay. Right. Do witnesses need to prove hate speech? How do they prove hate speech? Do they say they had, or it affected them?
The best evidence would be direct or primary evidence from someone who actually had. That will be the best evidence. No, when you hear, you heard somebody speaking and or you saw him saying something, you are there. That evidence is of high probative value in court. It can enable us to secure conviction because we have challenges with electronic evidence. It has to go through a long process before it is certified by an expert, before it becomes admissible in court. But oral evidence, primary evidence, the person who actually saw, who actually heard, who actually felt it, that evidence is direct evidence that it's of high probability.
And as Mark is winding up, it's also important to prove the intent. And that's why he was saying you might need to bring in an anthropologist or a linguistic, to bring those utterances into a particular context, because there's also the use of coded language within our own communities. Like a commission, as a commission, we have done a research on the use of coded language by all the ethnic groups within our within our space, so that when a Kalenjin wants to incite feelings of contempt to maybe people from the lake, or they use specific terminology, and within their group they'll have understood and communicated. But as an innocent, silent listener, you might not pick it up. But they are talking to each other.
Oh, wow. So how do you actually operate with media that is what is it called? The media, the regional media. Do you have people monitoring those?
Yes, we are partnering with the Media Council of Kenya and also, of course, the Communication Authority to monitor what we call vernacular radio stations, so that we are able to pick out these discussions, so that once it is mentioned, then we are quickly able to get these clips from either Media Council or the Communication Authority. We do the analysis, get linguistic experts and any other necessary expert to bring out the intentions of the speaker, because there is no commission of an offense until you are able to prove the intention of that specific. First understand and also get the intention of the speaker. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. I had like 50 questions. I haven't exhausted them. I think this is a discussion that can be had. I think towards the election, we need to have more and more of these discussions going on. Yes. And I just want to thank you. I want to end the program because we've gone in quite a length in as much as we started late. But thank you so much for an interesting discussion. I think I've learned a lot. I came in afraid. I'm one of those who are very anxious about elections. That if I had a chance to ship out when it's happening, then I would do that with my whole family and come back when it's done.
You want elections to be like Christmas.
So we want elections to be like Christmas. But again, what has come through is that we need, as voters and as the public, to participate. The institutions are clearly there. We just need to work with the institutions to make things work and make elections like Christmas. So I want to thank you, everyone who's been tuned in. AB Kipngeno, thank you again. He says he's locked in, as usual. Let the knowledge begin. I think we're actually learning a lot from this. I also, the other day, just got a chat, actually from you put up a post on Facebook and somebody said something about, I think, evidence. And then when I liked it, he just send me a message and saying, I'm a police officer and I watch the show. Quite enlightening. So people are actually following.
Yes, sure, true.
So it's actually being, we are educating people about this, including myself. I'm learning a lot from this. So yeah, so you want to come to an end of the program today. It's not the end of the discussion. It can continue online, on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. You ask a question, you'll get a response from it. Let us as citizens, what has come out clearly from this topic today is we need to play our part as citizens. Our power is on the vote, who we vote, and then how they subsequently operate with us as a nation will really be determined by our intelligence and our wokeness, if I'm allowed to use that word, as voters. So let us try and make elections. Let's look forward to elections like we look forward to Christmas and all those other nice holidays. And let us work with the institutions we have because the laws are there. What the missing thing, the gap that I got was our participation and our values as a people. What do we value? Do we value our country as much? So let's ask ourselves questions as we engage in campaigns, as we take our stands, as we actually eventually go and vote. Thank you so much once again. It's been great. It's been a good discussion. And I want to thank again the guests that were there. Let's just touch base on social and other platforms and see how we take this discussion forward. Looking forward to the next week. Have a blessed weekend ahead. Thank you so much.